Just about 24 hours ago, before becoming the world's first trillionaire, Elon Musk said this about this startup he had called SpaceX.
I give SpaceX less than a 10% chance of succeeding at all, to be clear. In fact, I told people this. I said, look, we're probably going to fail, but we should give it a try, because if we don't, if there's not a new company that enters space, we will never be a truly spacefaring civilization.
Some 2 decades later, SpaceX had the largest ever IPO. It's now one of the most valuable companies in the world. Joining us now, Loren, Grush, Bloomberg space reporter, Bailey Lipshultz with us as well. Both of them are bylines on this big take story you can find at Bloomberg.com or on the terminal. Ed Ludlow, another one of the bylines. We'll get Ryan Gould in the mix here at some point as well. Loren, let me turn to you first and just ask you for a vibe check on all of this. Going into the IPO yesterday, it was kind of a split event. You had some executives here in New York, at NASDAQ, at Times Square. There were others who were at SpaceX's headquarters, Elon Musk among them. I was struck by how Elon Musk was surrounded by a lot of employees, many of whom have woken up here, maybe not as fabulously wealthy as Elon Musk, but are certainly
they had a good day.
Rich individuals after what happened here.
Absolutely, and I think it was, probably for them a well-deserved moment of celebration. I know there were celebrations across all of SpaceX's sites. Don't think a lot of work got done, which is actually abnormal for SpaceX because, most of these employees have been working, 12-hour days, weekends. It's a very work-heavy culture. In fact, burnout culture is kind of part of the strategy a little bit at SpaceX. And another thing that, when it comes to their compensation, they take a bit of a lower salary compared to the rest of the industry, but they get these stock options. And so for them, it's been a long time payoff for all that hard work that they've put into the company.
Bailey, Loren got the first question because she came in and is here on set, and I'm always going to give you a hard time when you don't come in and join us.
I feel that's unfair.
But that's fine.
It's been a long week for all parties involved.
No, it really has. We appreciate you. Listen, the stock closed 19% higher at about $161 per share, but not everybody got to buy it. We were talking with Ed in the 7 a.m. hour about it. It was 4, possibly 5 times oversubscribed, and I asked him the same question. Is this like a, if you're in line, stay in line, you will get to invest in, bases on Mars when it's your turn? How does this happen now? How do you, if I wake up today and want this stock, how do I get it? And how much of the stock went to big bankers, big investments versus small retail consumers?
Well, once the stock started trading, anyone with a brokerage account could buy it. So you just can't buy it at the IPO price, which was $135.
Got it.
And as we reported throughout the process, that was a fixed price, something abnormal, something Elon Musk wanted to do to kind of draw the line in the sand, if you will. The allocation process did skew heavily towards institutions, but we did see a lot of retail demand. So we saw the retail portion take about 20%, so $15 billion, which is larger than the vast majority of every IPO that's ever happened. So not a small feat there, but the remaining chunk was sold to institutions, heavily skewed towards so-called long-only funds, people who have known SpaceX, people who have known the company, and the big kind of pitch has been long. If you're getting allocated in this IPO process, we want you to show up when we have this massive unlock throughout later this year, when you do have, north of $1 trillion potentially in shares for sale, to step up and support the stock, not people who wanted to make a quick 20% profit, which we typically see. Obviously, people have to sell. That's how stocks open. Someone has to sell, someone has to buy. But that certainly is how that process played out. And we did hear that, much like many of these big deals, much like founder-led companies, Elon Musk and CFO Brett Johnson were very heavily involved in that allocation process and going through who was getting what.
We see the exuberance. We see that manifest in what happened with the stock yesterday. There are also critics of what's unfolded here. Jim Chanos among them. He spoke at a conference in New York this week, spoke on Bloomberg Money, on Bloomberg Television yesterday as well, talking about the prospects for this company and the valuation that he thinks is way higher than it should be. Let's take a listen to what Jim Chanos had to say.
Is it Elon premium times 2 or Elon premium divided by 2? I think that's really the question here, because there are people who believe in Elon and have bid up Tesla accordingly to well beyond where I think most fundamental analysts think it's worth. Now you have another Elon hopes and dreams company with an even bigger valuation. Neither of them, let's face it, are being valued on their operations.
Not valued on their operations. Loren, let me turn to you on this, because you go through that prospectus and there are all these caveats about when these next adventures that SpaceX plans to embark on might happen, if they might happen at all. Indeed, there's this caveat that, in fact, it might not come to pass. Why were investors, so many of them, so willing to bet on Elon Musk? I've been doing this kind of parallel back to Tesla, where I think there was more skepticism about making effectively a kind of blind bet on the magic of Elon Musk and what it could lead to. It does seem like if you look at the banks that have worked on this deal, the number of investors, people are willing to give him not even just a pass, but kind of climb onto that bandwagon more easily than they were in the past.
Well, I think with SpaceX, I would often categorize it as his most successful company. And I think the reason that they felt confident that they could put those numbers in the prospectus and present essentially a money-losing business is because they are banking on people to remember the past success that they've had with their company so far. I mean, when you look at the resume of SpaceX compared to the rest of the space industry, it is quite remarkable. They are, right now they have a de facto monopoly on heavy lift launch with their Falcon 9 rocket. They pioneered the commercial use of reusable rockets. They are the backbone of our space program right now, for better or for worse. They're the only way we can get astronauts to the International Space Station from U.S. soil. They are by and far, they're an elite launch provider for NASA, for the Defense Department. So when you put all that together, I think what SpaceX is hoping is that you will take that past success and you'll believe that they can replicate it with this brand new adventure that they're embarking on.
Loren, what happens if a new administration comes in and says, we don't have the money for NASA, we're not using your company anymore, these are cuts? What happens if a competitor to Starlink, which people are trying to do, comes up, is able to do it cheaper? If China comes up with its own version that starts getting purchased other places? So much of what the value in this company is and what I think people are trying to invest in is really contingent on some outside factors. What happens if those things go away?
No, that's such a great point. I mean, in the prospectus, they mentioned that customer A, which is thought to be the aggregate of the U.S. government, is by and large one of their biggest customers. So yes, when it comes to how SpaceX was able to get to this point, taking contracts from the U.S. government, a huge factor in being able to develop the Falcon 9, develop their Crew Dragon capsule, and get to this point. However, what we have also seen is that they've been able to use the hardware that they developed with that money and those contracts to go beyond the need for the government as much as they used to need it for. So, for instance, their Starlink connectivity service, that has been growing. Its revenue has easily eclipsed its launch business, as we saw in that filing as well. That will probably continue to grow. So they have been able to find ways to make money that don't rely on the U.S. government. And I think that's also a big part of this whole AI data center, vision that Elon has too, is they saw the success with Starlink and they thought, okay, how can we replicate that, but through this AI dream that everybody is invested in right now.
Bailey, as you and Loren have written in the piece in the Big Take today, there was a lot of motivation on Elon Musk and SpaceX's part to get out first, to go ahead of OpenAI and Anthropic. And I'm curious sort of what the debut yesterday says to those two companies about what happens next. Do they see SpaceX as having maybe whet investor appetite for those big IPOs that are coming down the pipe, or have they cannibalized some of what they hope to get when they go public in a matter of weeks or months?
I think it certainly proved that the plumbing can work. So nothing broke on NASDAQ. There were no real trading errors, which was a big win, I think, for the entire ecosystem. And I think it did prove that investors are willing to show up and support a company's valuation that very much is looking towards the end of the decade, if not the next decade. So that's a big win for both of those companies. David, the big question, though, I think going forward is, as every banker and CEO will say, the IPO is a moment in time. So what happens next week? Really, what happens in the lead up potentially to Anthropic and OpenAI going public as soon as the fall, when more shares of SpaceX are available for trading, when it gets included to the NASDAQ 100? You're looking at a lot of potential stock supply that can be inundating the market later this year. That has more risk to impacting the market than $75 billion. It is a lot of money. It is a heck of a lot of money. But when you look at that just in one moment in time, it really is kind of just the start of what the process will look like. It could be a very different kind of trading backdrop when all those things are taken into account later on in the fall, when you consider that we could be having Anthropic making its kind of way towards public markets as well.
Really, given the size of this company, are we all kind of invested in SpaceX, whether we are actually invested in SpaceX or not at this point?
Not yet, but you will. I think it's one of those things, again, that, as Loren mentioned, it's potentially integral to everything, whether it's AI, obviously the space monopoly. When you look at just market structure and market dynamics, this is already one of, I think, the 6th or 7th largest companies in the world. It's not yet really in those indexes that would be linked to people's 401ks, but it will be shortly. And really, when you just look at that as a potential backdrop, you have to keep in mind that even if it gets cut in half from here, it's still a $1 trillion company. It still would be like one of the 10 or 12 largest companies in the world. So it still is going to have some real critical mass.
Loren, Bailey's talking about sort of what investors are going to be looking for here in the weeks ahead. IPO, a moment in time. Walk us through the priority list that SpaceX has going forward. They have this massive rocket that is so critical to all of their operations, and they have yet to have a wholly successful launch and return of it. That priority number one, what for them is most important now post IPO?
Sure, that is priority number one. It's also priority one for me
for you as well.
Yeah, just in terms of a coverage perspective. But yes, you mentioned Starship. Starship is their massive rocket that they're building down at their South Texas launch site called Starbase. That's where Elon Musk was to ring in the bell.
And it has to be reusable, right? Or the margins don't really work.
That is the goal. I mean,
okay.
and you have to understand, unlocking that has been something that the spaceflight enthusiasts have wanted to do since we started launching rockets.
Yeah.
The idea that we can bring back both pieces of the rocket fully intact and then, with minimal refurbishment, fly them again. Yes, as they laid out in that prospectus, if it doesn't reach that full reusability, the economics probably don't work because there is going to be costs associated with flying it again. And we're talking about flying Starship, I think they've said thousands of times, in a given time span. They want to just fly it back to back. They want it to come back, refly it again. That has just never been done before. I will never say never with SpaceX that they can't achieve it, but it's still a very long road of development ahead that they have to achieve. And so, with each of these Starship test flights, we will be watching them very intently. Now the public will be watching them even more so as well.
And their portfolios.
Exactly.